I used to be the best sonar technician the Navy had. Then, 3 years ago, something answered our signal from 40,000 feet below the Pacific, and it hasn't stopped watching since. Part 1, Echoes of the Deep. The pressure gauge screamed, 40,000 feet. Every creak in the hull sounded like a bone snapping. Ethan Cole gripped the sonar console with both hands. The metal was slick with condensation and blood. Red emergency lights pulsed through the control room, painting the faces of the crew in shades of panic. "Captain, we're past the limit," Rodriguez shouted from engineering. "Hull stress in the red." A sound cut him off. Not mechanical, not natural. A single slow thump that rolled through the steel like the heartbeat of a planet. Every man froze. Even the alarms seemed to flinch. Then it came again. 12 seconds apart. Perfect rhythm. "Jesus," someone whispered, "it's alive." The sonar screen bloomed with impossible shapes, organic arcs the size of islands. Ethan's training kicked in. Analyze, identify, classify. But the data made no sense. Biological density off the charts. Temperature gradients fluctuating like respiration. The USS Helios had descended to record an anomaly. They had found it, or maybe it had been waiting for them. "Reverse thrust," Captain Mercer barked. No response. Controls dead. The ocean had them. Outside, the floodlights illuminated nothing, only darkness that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. Then something moved in that darkness. A ridge? A fin? No. It curved upward, smooth, deliberate, massive. A wall of flesh slid past the viewport, skin like obsidian silk, glowing veins pulsing beneath the surface. And then the eye. It opened slowly, the size of a house. Iris contracting against the beam of their lights. A vertical pupil shimmered with deep green luminescence. It looked directly into the Helios, through the hull, through them. Ethan's breath stopped. He felt seen, catalogued, understood. The sonar erupted in static, not random, patterned. 12-second intervals, variations in pitch like coded speech, a message. "Captain, it's transmitting." The rest was swallowed by a roar that wasn't sound, but pressure. The hull bowed inward. Bolts sheared, panels burst, water exploded through seams like shrapnel. Ethan was lifted off his seat, thrown against the console. The world tilted. A beam of light from the ceiling spun in wild arcs. Mercer's voice came over the intercom, calm and fatalistic. "Mayday, reactor compromised, all hands." The line cut. Through the chaos, Ethan's headset still carried that pulse. Thump. 12 seconds. Thump. Again. Underneath it, faint words. "You are not first." Water surged over the consoles. The lights died. Darkness consumed them. Ethan reached for the emergency harness, but a blast of pressure tore him free. Cold stabbed into his skull. He thought he heard someone praying. Then everything went black. Silence. Weightless. When he opened his eyes, there was sunlight. Waves slapped his face. He was floating, alone. He screamed, but the sound disappeared into endless blue. The sunlight became fluorescent ceiling light. Ethan woke gasping in his apartment, soaked in sweat. His hands still clawed for a console that no longer existed. The sound of a passing truck vibrated the window pane. It was enough to trigger the echo of sonar in his head. He sat up, heart hammering, breathing hard. 3 years. And the dream hadn't faded. The Pacific glittered outside his window like a sheet of glass hiding a monster. From this high up in San Diego's Mission Beach district, the ocean looked harmless. Tourists, surfers, seagulls. But Ethan knew what slept beneath. He poured water from a bottle, hands trembling. The cup clinked against the counter. The rhythm was the same. 12 seconds apart. He dropped it, glass shattering. His therapist had a name for it, triggered memory association. Ethan called it what it was, the ocean calling back. He turned on the radio just to drown the silence. A local DJ joked about weekend waves. The sound of surf under the music made Ethan's skin crawl. He shut it off. The apartment walls were lined with relics of a life he'd stopped living. Framed Navy commendations, an American flag folded in a triangle, photos of the Helios crew, 38 smiles that no longer existed. He stared at Captain Mercer's face. The man had died a hero, according to official reports. Catastrophic equipment failure, they said. Routine training exercise gone wrong. But Ethan had seen the truth. It hadn't been mechanical failure, it had been contact. He sat at his desk, opened a notebook filled with sketches of sonar waves, equations, and phrases he couldn't forget. 12-second interval. Biological signal. Depth, 38,000 papyrfi. A sticky note in his own handwriting read, "It's not over." Later that morning, he walked along the harbor, sunglasses hiding eyes bruised by insomnia. The smell of salt water usually comforted sailors. To him, it was a warning. He paused by the memorial wall honoring lost submariners. The names of the Helios crew were carved into steel. Tourists snapped photos. Ethan just stood there, whispering the names under his breath. Dr. Emily Hart's voice replayed in his mind from yesterday's session. "You have to forgive yourself, Ethan. Survivors often create myths to explain tragedy." He had smiled politely then, but now, looking at those names, he whispered, "Myths don't leave sonar recordings." He took out a small USB drive, Navy-issued, encrypted, and rolled it between his fingers. He'd copied it before the Navy confiscated the data. He'd listened to it every night for 3 years. The pattern never changed. 12 seconds, perfect rhythm. He plugged in his earbuds. The low hum filled his ears. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It felt like a presence brushing against his thoughts. He stopped walking, looked out at the waves breaking against the pier. The pulse quickened. For a moment he thought he saw something. Far out, just beyond the surf line, a ripple moving against the current. Then it was gone. He blinked hard, pulled the earbuds out. The hum stopped, but the feeling didn't. The deep was awake again. That night, he dreamed he was back inside the Helios. Everything was quiet. No alarms, no panic, just him, floating through the corridors as if underwater. He passed closed compartments where crew members stood motionless, eyes open, lips moving without sound. When he leaned closer, he realized they were mouthing words. He couldn't hear them, but he knew what they were saying. "You are not first." He jolted awake, the clock reading 3:12 a.m. The city outside was silent except for distant waves. On instinct, he reached for the radio. Static. He twisted the dial slowly. Amid the white noise, a low-frequency thump pulsed through the speaker. Once, twice, exactly 12 seconds apart. Ethan's throat went dry. He grabbed a pen, started timing the intervals. 12 seconds every time. He stared at the clock. The next beat would land at exactly 3:12:48, and it did. He leaned close to the radio, whispered, "What do you want?" Static hissed back, then a sound so faint he thought it was his imagination. A voice deep and slow, formed by modulation, not speech. "Return." The radio snapped silent. Ethan sat frozen. He looked toward the ocean through the window. Somewhere beyond that black horizon, something vast had just spoken to him. He spent the next day pretending life was normal. Coffee, gym, grocery store. But every metallic hum or refrigerator buzz carried the same cadence. 12 seconds. He needed to see Dr. Hart again. The clinic sat near Balboa Park. Inside, the sterile scent and soft lighting didn't help much. She greeted him with professional calm. "You look tired." "Dreams again," he said. "Same content?" He hesitated. It's getting clearer. I can hear it now. The sound? He nodded. She took notes. Let's talk about what it means to you. Maybe it's your mind replaying trauma, a way of seeking closure. He smiled faintly. Doctor, closure doesn't speak your name through a radio. She looked up, confused. It spoke your name. He rubbed his temples. Not directly, but it knows me. Dr. Hart leaned forward. Ethan, the brain can... No, he interrupted softly. This isn't my brain. This is something alive. A long silence hung between them. Finally, she said, then tell me what you think it wants. He looked toward the window where a plane was crossing the sky above the Pacific. It wants to finish what it started. By that night, Ethan opened his encrypted laptop. He inserted the USB drive. The sonar recording filled the screen, a waveform like a heartbeat stretching across the timeline. He amplified the frequencies, filtered out noise. Beneath the thumps was another layer, a secondary pattern almost hidden. He slowed it down, reversed it. A shape formed in the visualizer, a spiral, repeating endlessly inward. He'd seen that shape before, on the Helios, carved into the bulkhead near the sonar room after the first contact. None of the crew admitted to doing it. He stared at the spiral until the room seemed to tilt. His vision flickered. For an instant, he saw water pouring through the window, flooding the apartment. He blinked. The illusion vanished. He saved the file under one word: echo. Outside, thunder rolled over the ocean, though the forecast said clear skies. Lightning flashed far out to sea. Ethan stepped onto his balcony. The storm was building from nowhere, black clouds forming a vortex. He could feel static crawling across his skin. A low rumble vibrated through the metal railing. He realized it wasn't thunder. It was deeper, rhythmic, 12 seconds apart. He whispered, "No, not again." From somewhere within the clouds, a faint glow rose, pulsing like bioluminescence beneath waves. The air smelled of salt and ozone. He backed inside, heart racing. The apartment lights flickered with each pulse. He grabbed his phone, tried recording. The microphone peaked instantly. The waveform showed nothing but distortion. The building's fire alarm blared, triggered by electrical interference. Neighbors shouted in the hallway. Ethan stared at the ocean through the glass door. The glow on the horizon flared once more, then vanished. Silence. The alarm stopped. Power returned. Everything looked normal again. He sank onto the floor, hands shaking. "They found me," he whispered. Morning came gray and heavy. The ocean looked innocent again. But Ethan couldn't unhear the rhythm in his head. 12 seconds. Like a second heartbeat inside him. He brewed coffee and opened his laptop. The echo file waited, pulsing faintly on the screen. He hit play. The waveform came alive. Steady thumps, then static, then a faint hum that almost sounded like breathing. He leaned closer, adjusted filters. The hum separated into layers like multiple voices speaking at once, far below human range. One phrase rose through the distortion. Not words exactly, but syllables that arranged themselves in his mind. "Below. Remember?" Ethan shut the laptop, heart pounding. He looked around his apartment like someone expecting company, but the only movement came from the curtains swaying in the ocean breeze. He thought about calling Dr. Hart, then realized what he'd have to explain. A voice from the deep ocean? She'd call the hospital. Maybe she should. Instead, he went for a drive. North along the Pacific Coast Highway. The further he got from San Diego, the easier it was to breathe. The open road, the surf in the distance, it almost felt normal. Almost. Because every time the waves crashed, he heard the pattern. At a small coastal diner near Monterey, he stopped for breakfast. The waitress poured coffee, smiled politely. "You Navy?" she asked, pointing at his tattoo, a faded trident on his forearm. Used to be, he said. Submarine? He nodded. Her expression changed slightly. You hear about that new wreck they found? Off Guam? Another sub, real deep. Coast Guard's not saying much. Ethan's stomach turned cold. When? Last week, I think. Some research team picked up weird sonar echoes. Same place your folks were lost. He forced a smile, left a big tip, and walked out. His coffee sat untouched. Back in his truck, he opened his phone and searched for it. No headlines, no official reports, just a few obscure forums discussing anomalous deep-sea signals detected near the Mariana Trench. The posts included spectrograms, familiar waveforms, same 12-second pulse, but one thread mentioned something else. Signal now moving northeast, toward California. Ethan stared at the words until his reflection blurred in the glass. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by the window recording the ocean with a portable mic. Hours of nothing but wind and distant surf. Then, at 3:12 a.m., a faint thump. He checked the time. 12 seconds later, another. He turned up the gain. The sound was there, faint but growing, coming from deep beneath the Pacific shelf. He muttered to himself, "It's not supposed to travel this far." He cross-referenced the pattern with the echo file. Identical. He wrote the words in his notebook. It's moving. The lights flickered again. The pulse came through the wiring, vibrating the metal frame of the apartment. A low, bone-deep resonance. Ethan ran to the balcony. The ocean was black and still. No ships, no lightning, just that pulse rolling through the air like an invisible wave. Something was coming closer. He stumbled back inside, grabbed the USB, his notebook, his keys. He needed to find someone who would listen, someone outside the Navy's chain of silence. At dawn, he parked outside the house of an old friend, retired officer named Captain Noah Briggs. They'd served together years ago on the USS Houston. Briggs had since moved inland, taught oceanic systems at UC Santa Barbara. Briggs opened the door, still in his bathrobe, blinking at Ethan. "Cole? Jesus, I thought you were dead." "Almost," Ethan said. "I need to show you something." They sat in his cluttered office, surrounded by nautical charts and sonar printouts. Ethan plugged in the USB, played the file. Briggs listened, expression shifting from curiosity to unease. "You said this came from the Helios?" "Recorded minutes before we went down." Briggs leaned closer to the screen. "This harmonic structure, it's biological, but nothing on Earth should resonate at this frequency underwater." "Exactly," Ethan said, "and it's active again. The signal's moving." Briggs frowned. "Moving?" Ethan pulled up the forum posts, tracked northeast, toward us. Briggs rubbed his jaw. "Cole, if that's true, this isn't just a sonar anomaly, it's migration." Ethan nodded slowly. "Something's rising." The room fell silent except for the faint buzz of electronics. Then a soft tremor rippled underfoot. The coffee in Briggs's mug quivered. "Was that?" Briggs started but stopped as the lights dimmed. A deep hum rolled through the walls. 12 seconds. Another. Ethan whispered, "It's here." The house shuddered. Books fell. An emergency siren sounded faintly from the harbor miles away. Briggs ran to the window. "It can't be earthquakes. The epicenter's offshore." Ethan stared at the Pacific horizon through the morning haze. A line of foam stretched unnaturally far out, like something massive just shifted beneath the surface. "Briggs, we need to go," Ethan said. "Go where?" "Anywhere inland." They drove north, leaving the coast behind, the tremors fading. The radio crackled with breaking news. Unusual seismic activity reported off the California coast. Officials urge residents to avoid beaches. Ethan turned it off. He didn't need the news to tell him what it was. He already knew. That night, they checked into a roadside motel near Bakersfield. Briggs was still glued to his laptop, analyzing the signal data. "It's evolving," he said. "The intervals are changing." Ethan leaned over his shoulder. The spectrogram displayed a new pattern, short bursts within each 12-second beat, a code within a code. Briggs decoded it into binary, then ASCII text. The result made his breath catch. "They remember." Briggs looked up. "What the hell does that mean?" Ethan whispered. "It's not the first time they've been here." The motel lights flickered. A low hum vibrated the window panes. "Power surge," Briggs said nervously. Ethan shook his head. "No, that's not power." He walked outside into the parking lot. The air was electric, the same ozone scent from the night of the storm in San Diego. He looked up. No clouds, just stars. But the stars moved. Slowly, like they were reflecting on rippling water. Then he realized they weren't stars. They were lights beneath the atmosphere. He felt the vibration in his chest before he heard it. The 12-second beat. Only now it was faster, closer. He ran back inside. "We need to shut everything off." Briggs stared. "What are you talking about?" "They can track signals. Any electronic frequency, they follow resonance." As if on cue, the laptop screen glowed white-hot. Sparks flew. The motel power cut out completely. The hum deepened into a physical pressure that made their ears pop. Ethan hit the floor. "Turn it off! Turn it off!" Then silence. When the emergency lights came on, Briggs's laptop was smoking. The hard drive cracked in half. Ethan stood slowly. "They don't want to be found." Briggs stared at him. "Ethan, what did you bring to my house?" Ethan didn't answer. He looked out the window toward the west. Somewhere beyond the mountains, the Pacific glowed faintly against the night. 2 days later, federal agents arrived at Briggs's office. Black SUVs, no insignia. They questioned staff, confiscated computers. Ethan watched from a distance. He knew the pattern: containment. The same thing they'd done after the Helios disaster. He called Dr. Hart one last time. "If anyone asks, you never saw me," he said. "Ethan, what's going on?" He paused. "Remember what I said about the sound?" "Yes, it's coming from everywhere now." He hung up. Now that evening, Ethan drove south toward San Diego. He stopped at a cliff overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the horizon blood red. He pulled out his recorder and turned it on. "This is Ethan Cole, former U.S. Navy sonar specialist, USS Helios. If you're hearing this, it means they're here." He pointed the microphone toward the water. At first, only wind and waves. Then, there it was, the pulse. "Listen closely," he said. "That's not the ocean. That's them." The recording spiked, lights on the device flashing erratically. His voice broke as he whispered, "They're awake." Thunder rolled across a clear sky. He turned off the recorder, slipped it into a waterproof case, and buried it under the sand. Maybe someone would find it one day, someone who'd believe him. He looked out across the darkening Pacific, where faint blue lights shimmered beneath the surface. They weren't reflections of the moon. He whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." A faint echo returned, as if the sea itself replied, "Neither are you." If you've made it this far, remember this. There are things in our oceans older than life on land. They watch, they wait, they listen. And when we listen back, sometimes they answer. This is only the beginning. Make sure you subscribe, because next time, we're going deeper. Bay Part 2. The signal returns. The ocean looked calm that morning. Too calm. From the cliffs above La Jolla, Ethan watched the Pacific glisten like polished steel. The breeze smelled of salt and electricity. An echo of the night the pulse had returned. Somewhere beneath that horizon, something was moving again. He hadn't slept. The echo file burned in his mind. The 12-second rhythm had changed. Shorter now, faster, like a heartbeat quickening before the kill. A black SUV slowed on the coastal road below. Tinted windows, government plates. Ethan ducked behind a rock outcrop, every muscle tight. They were watching him again. He waited until the car disappeared, then slipped down a back trail toward his pickup. Inside, a duffel bag waited. Flash drives, notebooks, a sidearm he'd sworn never to touch again. He wasn't running this time. He was hunting. At 0900 hours, he parked outside the Veterans Medical Center in San Diego. Dr. Emily Hart hadn't returned his calls since their last session. He needed her help, and her clearance badge. The lobby smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. Veterans sat in plastic chairs staring at muted TVs. When she saw him, she froze halfway down the hall. "Ethan?" He gave a small, nervous smile. "I know I shouldn't be here. You shouldn't even be in the city," she said softly. "They've been asking about you." "Who?" She glanced toward the security camera in the corner. "You know who." Ethan lowered his voice. "Then let's talk somewhere they can't listen." And they met in the staff parking lot. Dr. Hart's hands trembled as she lit a cigarette, something she hadn't done in years. "I read the news," she said. "The seismic spikes off California, they match the coordinates you gave me last session." "It's not earthquakes," Ethan said. "It's the same frequency. It's the echo." "Ethan, you're not—" He handed her a small recorder. "Listen before you say anything." She hesitated, pressed play. A low pulse filled the air, 12 seconds apart but layered with a higher frequency code. Her face drained of color. "This is real. It's moving east, and someone's jamming the data. I need access to NOAA's classified logs. Your clearance can get us in." "Ethan, that's federal property. I could lose my license, my job." "They lost 38 men," he snapped. "You think your job matters more than that?" She stared at him for a long moment, then exhaled. "Meet me at my office tonight, after hours." At midnight, they entered the hospital's restricted research wing. Dr. Hart swiped her badge. The security door clicked open. Inside, rows of computer terminals glowed in the dark. Ethan connected his flash drive. Within seconds, NOAA satellite data streamed across the screens. Oceanic readings, sonar arrays, temperature shifts. He filtered by frequency. The 12-second pulse appeared instantly. Hart covered her mouth. "My God!" It wasn't a single source anymore. It was dozens. "Multiple origin points," Ethan whispered. "Across the Pacific Basin." She pointed to a flashing marker near Hawaii. "That one. It's new." Ethan zoomed in. The data showed something massive rising from 33,000 feet. Then the feed cut to black. "Signal terminated," the screen read. Hart frowned. Terminated or silenced? The speakers crackled. For a moment through the static came a faint hum. 12 seconds. The computer froze. Lines of code scrolled across the monitor by themselves. "We remember, return to us." Hart backed away. "What is that?" "Not human code," Ethan said quietly. "That's the same pattern that corrupted our systems on the Helios." Suddenly, all the monitors flashed white. The room filled with an ear-splitting tone. Ultrasound beyond normal hearing, yet they both felt it vibrate their bones. Fire alarms blared. The emergency lights flickered red. Ethan yanked the drive from the port and pulled Hart toward the door. Security rushed in moments later, shouting orders, but the computers were dead. Screens burned out, smoke rising from inside the casings. They escaped into the night before anyone could question them. They parked near an abandoned warehouse on the harbor. The city slept under a heavy marine fog. Ethan's hands shook as he examined the flash drive. The metal was warm, too warm. Hart leaned against the dashboard, pale and silent. "Ethan, what if that thing was communicating with us?" "It was, and the Navy's been intercepting it for years." She looked at him sharply. "How do you know?" He reached into his duffel and pulled out an old mission file stamped Project Leviathan, classified. "Briggs found this before they silenced him," Ethan said. "It details experiments, deep ocean resonance trials, signal amplification, biological mapping. They were trying to talk back." Hart flipped through the pages, eyes widening at the photos. Massive sonar rigs on ocean floors, strange organic patterns etched into steel. "This isn't communication," she said. "It's worship." Ethan nodded slowly. "The Navy called them echo entities. I think they're older than the continents." She looked out at the fog. "If they've awakened, what happens now?" Ethan loaded a new file on his laptop. "Now we find where they're going." The data showed a migration pattern forming a curved line across the Pacific, each pulse moving northeast toward the continental shelf. He traced the arc with his finger. "They're converging here." Hart squinted. "Monterey Bay. That's a deep-sea canyon, thousands of feet down. Perfect hiding place." Ethan grabbed his bag. "We need a vessel." Hart stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "You want to go back into the water?" He met her eyes. "If we don't, no one will believe what's coming." A few days later, they arrived in Monterey under heavy fog. The marina smelled of diesel and rain. Ethan's contact was waiting. Reggie Marlowe, ex-Navy diver turned salvage operator, scar across his jaw like a warning sign. "You owe me a drink for this," Reggie said, patting the hull of his old research sub, the Mako. "She still dive that deep?" Ethan asked. "Rated for 25,000 feet. You planning to find Atlantis?" "Something deeper." Reggie looked at Hart, then back at Ethan. "You serious?" Ethan handed him a stack of cash and the promise of another when they returned. Reggie sighed. "All right, Captain Ahab, but when we hit the trench and the pressure starts singing, don't say I didn't warn you." But they launched at dusk. The Mako slipped beneath the waves, lights cutting through green water. Inside, the hum of machinery mingled with their shallow breathing. At 5,000 feet, sunlight vanished. Only darkness and the sonar's slow ping. Hart watched the monitor nervously. "Depth reading?" 15,000, Reggie said, still descending. Ethan adjusted the passive sonar. The display flickered, background noise, pressure distortion, then a pulse. 12 seconds apart. Hart whispered, "It's waiting." Ethan's knuckles went white on the controls. "No, it's listening." The signal strength doubled, then tripled. On the monitor, a shape appeared, massive, indistinct, not a mountain, not a vessel. Reggie's voice cracked. That's moving." The sonar trace pulsed in rhythm. The creature, if that's what it was echoing their signal back. Hart stared at the screen. "It's communicating." Ethan replied, "No, it's locking on." A sudden jolt rocked the sub. The lights flickered. Alarms screamed. "Pressure surge," Reggie shouted. "Something's creating a current below us." Ethan switched to visual. A faint blue glow shimmered beneath them, hundreds of meters wide, spiraling like a galaxy underwater. Then came the shadow, enormous, moving upward. Hart whispered, "Oh, God." Reggie throttled the engines, but the sub barely moved. The current pinned them in place. Outside, tendrils of bioluminescent light snaked through the water, wrapping around the hull like searching fingers. The pulse thundered through the cabin. 12 seconds, then 10, then 8. Ethan gritted his teeth. "It's calling something bigger." The sonar showed multiple contacts now, rising from every direction. Hart's voice was barely a whisper. "How many are there?" Ethan stared at the screen. "Too many." A voice came through the intercom, distorted, low, and not human. Words stretched into vibration. "We are the depth," Hart screamed. Reggie shouted over the alarms. "Power's dropping." The lights went out. Only the faint glow from outside remained, blue and terrible. Ethan fumbled for the emergency beacon. "We have to surface now." Reggie pulled the manual ballast lever. Nothing. "It's jammed." The hull groaned under pressure. Something struck the sub from below, sending tools flying. Hart clung to the seat. "Ethan!" He reached for her hand as another impact spun them sideways. Through the viewport, an enormous eye passed by, green and ancient. Reggie cursed. "That's it, we're dead," Ethan shouted. "No, we're seen." The sub shook violently. Then suddenly everything went still. The blue light vanished. The sonar flatlined. Reggie panted. "Did it leave?" Ethan whispered. "No, it's deciding." Then slowly the sonar came alive again, not as pulses, but as a voice. Binary flashes translating into human language on the display. Leviathan awakes. The hull lights flickered back on. Outside, the water shimmered as if filled with living veins. Hart covered her mouth. "Ethan, what is Leviathan?" He swallowed hard. Project Leviathan wasn't a mission name. It was a warning. The sub hung in darkness, the water pressing on it like a clenched fist. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Only the slow ping of the sonar, then silence again. Reggie's fingers hovered over the manual controls. "Depth's holding," he whispered, "but if that thing moves, the hull won't." Ethan studied the monitors. The message still glowed across the screen. "Leviathan awakes," and then began to fade, letter by letter, as if the sea itself were erasing it. "Take us up," he said. Reggie didn't argue. The sub's engines whined, metal trembling, then caught traction. The ascent was slow, cautious, like sneaking away from a sleeping giant. At 9,000 feet, the outside world began to glow again. Not blue this time. Red, faint, pulsing, coming from somewhere below. Hart whispered, "It's following." The sonar confirmed it. A shape rose with them, always staying just out of light range. Its heartbeat matched the rhythm that had haunted Ethan's dreams. He shut off the sonar. Silence. Then another pulse, coming through the hull itself, as though the creature could feel the absence of sound. "Keep climbing," Ethan ordered. For an hour they rose in uneasy quiet until the water brightened to gray and the pressure eased. The instant they broke the surface, the world felt wrong. The sea was perfectly flat, the air too still. No stars, no wind, only mist. Reggie exhaled shakily. "Surface at 0240. Coordinates?" He stopped. The GPS showed nothing. Blank screen. They were surrounded by fog so thick it reflected their own lights back at them. And in that white silence, another sound began. Soft, almost human. A voice drifting through the mist, repeating their own sonar pings like an echo that had learned to speak. Hart covered her ears. "Make it stop." Ethan leaned toward the glass. Somewhere out there, something moved. Huge, slow, deliberate. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it listening. Then the radio crackled. A man's voice. Flat, official. "Vessel Mako, this is Naval Command. Power down and prepare for escort. You are entering restricted waters." Reggie swore. "They found us." "Not them," Ethan said. "It called them." Two gray silhouettes appeared through the fog. Military ships, silent except for the hum of their engines. Spotlights cut across the waves, pinning the Mako in a cone of light. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "Cut engines, surrender all recorded data." Ethan met Hart's eyes. "If they take that drive, it disappears forever." He grabbed the flash drive, slipped it into a waterproof capsule. and shoved it into an emergency buoy. When I signal release it, let the current take it east. Reggie muttered, "You're insane." "Maybe," Ethan said, "but someone topside has to know the truth." The Navy cutter drew alongside. Armed men in black uniforms shouted orders. Ethan raised his hands, buying seconds. Hart released the buoy quietly into the sea. It vanished under the fog. Then the soldiers boarded. Their leader wore no insignia, only a cold expression Ethan recognized from the Helios debriefings. "Mr. Cole," the man said, "you've seen too much." Ethan forced a bitter smile. "So have you." The man turned to his team. "Secure them, scuttle the vessel." Before anyone could move, the sea itself erupted. A column of water shot upward, drenching everything. The fog tore apart, revealing something vast beneath the surface, a single, circular glow miles wide. Everyone froze, even the soldiers. The voice from the deep rolled through the air like thunder wrapped in a whisper. "Return." The Navy ship's instruments went dead. Lights flickered, radios screamed static. The surface boiled as if something enormous was rising. Ethan shouted, "Get below, now!" They dived into the sub just as a wall of water struck the ships. Through the viewport he saw one of the destroyers lifted, twisted, then dropped like a toy. The ocean swallowed the wreck in seconds. Inside the Mako, Reggie struggled with controls, yelling over alarms. "Everything's fried." Ethan grabbed the manual steering. "We ride the current, east." The sub lurched forward, carried by waves that moved with unnatural rhythm, almost guiding them. Behind them, the red glow sank slowly back into the depths. The sea folding itself closed like a wound. When the storm finally stilled, dawn was breaking. The radio was silent. No pursuit. Only the faint hiss of static, and under it, a new pattern. Short bursts, uneven spacing, a message hidden in the noise. Hart translated softly, almost afraid to say it aloud. "The surface remembers." Ethan leaned back in his seat, exhausted, soaked, staring at the horizon that burned gold over calm water. "They're not just in the ocean anymore," he said. "They're in the systems, the frequencies, everything we've built to listen." Hart whispered, "What do we do?" He looked down at his shaking hands, at the salt water dripping from the console. "We find Briggs's contact in Washington. Someone in intelligence knows what Leviathan really is." Reggie glanced over. "And if they already found your buoy?" Ethan gave a hollow laugh. "Then the ocean's going to teach them the same lesson it taught us." Outside, the water rippled once. Small, gentle, almost peaceful. Then the pulse returned, faint but certain, traveling through the hull and into their bones. 12 seconds. Again. Hart closed her eyes. "It's never going to stop, is it?" Ethan watched the sunrise reflected on the still water. "No," he said. "This was only their hello." Part 3. The Awakening. Washington, D.C. looked washed out beneath the storm clouds. All slate glass and nervous energy. 3,000 miles from the Pacific, Ethan Cole still swore he could hear the ocean humming inside the city's power lines. He and Dr. Emily Hart moved fast through Union Station, blending with commuters. The flash drive from the Mako rested in a lead-lined case under Ethan's arm. If Project Leviathan existed anywhere, its trail ended here, in the city that built the cover-ups. Their contact was waiting in a cafe across from the Naval Intelligence Annex. A man with a limp and the clipped vowels of a career officer. "Call me Briggs's insurance policy," he said quietly. His real name, Commander Daniel Rourke. Rourke slid a sealed envelope across the table. Inside were photocopies of mission memos, stamped eyes only, Project Leviathan. "They started it in '98, Rourke said, after satellites picked up impossible sonar returns. The Helios wasn't the first to make contact. It was just the one that didn't come back." Hart leaned forward. What did they find? Rourke's gaze flicked toward the window, rain streaking down the glass. Not what, who, something intelligent, buried beneath the trench since before recorded history. He pushed a photograph toward them. It showed a section of ocean floor, smooth, carved, geometric, not rock. Architecture, Ethan whispered. You built the mission to wake it up. Rourke didn't deny it. The signal was supposed to be passive mapping, but the resonance matched human neural frequencies. You didn't just ping the deep, Cole. You knocked on a door. Thunder rattled the windows. Somewhere outside, sirens wailed. Rourke glanced at his watch. They're tracking my badge. You've got 5 minutes. He handed Ethan a keycard and a set of coordinates. Storage 42, Arlington sub-basement. Everything you need to know is there. Get it before they do. Then he stood, straightened his coat, and walked out into the rain. Within seconds, black SUVs turned the corner. Ethan and Hart slipped through the rear exit, disappearing into the downpour. The sub-basement smelled of rust and old paper. Rows of filing cabinets stretched into the dark. Hart's flashlight trembled in her hand. Rourke said storage 42. Ethan murmured, left side. They found the locker, a steel crate secured with biometric locks. Ethan slid the keycard. The light turned green. Inside lay reels of magnetic tape, sonar logs, and a hard drive labeled Mariana Trench Rec 1001. He powered up a portable reader. The tape hissed, then played back a recording. Voices, then a low tone so deep it vibrated their ribs. Underneath it, a second sound emerged. Rhythmic, structured, unmistakably speech. Hart's voice cracked. Its language. The translation software rendered a phrase onto the screen, each letter appearing slowly. We sleep beneath your cities. Ethan stared, jaw tightening. It's not just in the trench. A motion sensor blinked red behind them. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, heavy, synchronized. Time's up, he hissed. They grabbed the drive and ran. 2 armed men in tactical black turned the corner. Muzzle flashes lit the hall. Ethan shoved Hart through a side door, bullets sparking off metal. They burst into a maintenance tunnel, alarms wailing overhead. Steam hissed from broken pipes, turning the air into a red fog of warning lights. Who are they? Hart gasped. Same unit that debriefed us after the Helios, Ethan said. They're not protecting secrets, they're protecting the thing itself. At the end of the tunnel, an elevator shaft gaped open. The car was gone. Ethan looped a cable around a pipe, clipped it to his belt, and started lowering Hart down. The agents appeared above, shouting orders. Gunfire ricocheted, sparks rained. They dropped into the darkness, boots hitting concrete 12 stories below. Ethan yanked the cable free. Subway's 2 blocks east, we can lose them in the tunnels. They sprinted through echoing corridors until they reached a maintenance door leading into the metro. When they emerged onto the platform, commuters screamed. The agents had followed. A train screamed into the station. Doors slid open. Ethan grabbed Hart's hand. They dove inside just as the train pulled away, leaving their pursuers shrinking into the distance. Only then did Hart notice the small, glowing crack running across the hard drive's casing. A soft pulse bled through it, 12 seconds apart. Ethan stared at it. It's active, Hart whispered. You think it's communicating? He shook his head slowly. No, it's listening. The whole time, we've been the broadcast. That night, they hid in a rundown motel outside the city. Rain hammered the roof. The pulse from the drive synced with the thunder, louder every minute. Ethan hooked it to a laptop. The screen filled with a spiral pattern identical to the carving on the Helios. Within it, coordinates scrolled, locations stretching from Guam to California to the mid-Atlantic ridge. Hart's voice was barely a whisper. It's mapping fault lines. Ethan realized what the pattern formed when connected, a ring encircling the planet. "Leviathan's not one creature," he said. "It's a network." The lights flickered. The air pressure dropped. The window panes flexed inward as if the sky were breathing. A low hum vibrated through the floorboards. Hart clutched his arm. "Ethan, look!" Outside, puddles trembled in perfect rhythm, 12 seconds apart. From somewhere far away came the moan of sirens, the rumble of jets scrambling overhead. But over all of it, the same voice they had heard in the depths rolled through the storm, calm and endless. "Awake." They fled before dawn, heading south toward a secure lab Rourke had marked on the drive. Somewhere in New Mexico's desert, far from the ocean, Project Leviathan had built its final outpost, a listening array buried under rock to capture signals from the trench. As they drove, news stations crackled with reports of unexplained tidal surges along the west coast, strange harmonics disrupting communication networks, pilots grounding flights because the air was humming. Hart turned down the radio. "They're everywhere." Ethan nodded grimly. "And they're waking others." The desert stretched ahead, endless and silent, but in the quiet between the heartbeat pulses of the car engine, he could still hear it. 12 seconds, always 12. He whispered to himself, "We're not running from the deep anymore. The deep is coming here." Part 4, The Surface and the Silence. The New Mexico desert looked dead from above, flat, colorless, endless. But 100 feet beneath it, something was alive. Ethan Cole and Dr. Emily Hart arrived at dawn, their jeep kicking dust into the rising sun. The coordinates from Rourke's drive had led them here, to a decommissioned radar facility outside Alamogordo. The sign read, U.S. Weather Research Station 43, but the padlocked gate, motion cameras, and faint vibration underfoot told a different story. Hart checked the drive's pulse. Still beating. 12 seconds, always 12. "Feels like it's calling home," she whispered. Ethan's voice was hoarse. "Then let's see who answers." They cut through the fence and descended into the main hangar. Dust drifted in beams of light, slicing through broken windows. At the far end, a freight elevator waited behind a steel door marked Authorized Personnel Only. Inside, the control panel had one button, B4. Ethan pressed it. The car rattled downward, deeper and deeper, until the desert heat gave way to the chill of underground air. When the doors opened, the world changed. Rows of consoles stretched the length of the chamber, all humming with low energy. Satellite maps covered one wall, glowing red along the world's tectonic scars. A logo above the central terminal read, Project Leviathan, Deep Communication Division. Hart exhaled. Rourke was right. They're still operating. A flicker on the main screen caught Ethan's eye. Live sonar feeds from multiple oceanic trenches. Every channel carried the same pulse pattern, 12 seconds. The signal had spread across the globe. He leaned closer. "They're syncing. It's not random, it's coordination." A voice echoed from behind them. "You finally figured it out." Ethan turned. Commander Clark stood at the doorway, uniform immaculate, a sidearm holstered at his hip. 2 security officers flanked him, weapons lowered but ready. "Welcome back, petty officer," Clark said evenly. "You were never supposed to see this place again." Hart stepped forward. "You lied to the world. You told them it was an accident." Clark didn't blink. "Containment requires narrative. The truth would destroy the chain of command." Ethan's fists clenched. "The truth's already breaking through the chain." Clark motioned toward the main screen. "What you're witnessing is evolution. The entities you call Leviathans are not our enemies. They are the architects of balance. The ocean listens because they command it. And now, we listen to them." Hart shook her head. You're collaborating with something that kills entire crews. It spared you, Clark said quietly. That was communication, selection. You're part of the exchange. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think you survived by accident? No, it marked you. The pulse from the drive grew louder, resonating through the floor. Lights dimmed. The screens flickered into static, then reformed into a single image. An eye, vast and luminous, staring through every monitor. Hart whispered, "It's here." Clark raised a hand as if in reverence. It's always been here. The room vibrated, alarms screamed. A pressure wave rippled through the underground base, knocking papers from tables and throwing dust from the ceiling. On the displays, coastlines began to light up with seismic warnings. San Francisco, Tokyo, Lisbon, all 12 seconds apart. Ethan lunged for the main console. They're triggering fault lines. They're using the planet like a transmitter. Clark shouted over the noise. It's not destruction, it's awakening. The first tremor hit, deep and slow like the heartbeat of the world. Concrete cracked, pipes burst. Hart grabbed the hard drive from the workstation. We have to shut it down. Ethan scanned the panels. One switch labeled Primary Link Sever. He slammed it down. The hum stopped. Silence swallowed the chamber. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the eye on the screens blinked. All the power died. Darkness, the kind that feels alive. Hart's whisper barely carried. Ethan, did we stop it? A low vibration rolled through the floor, slower this time, almost thoughtful. 12 seconds, then 11. It's changing, he said. From the shadows, Clark's voice emerged, oddly calm. You can't sever what was never separate. Emergency lights flared red. The walls glistened, not with water, but with condensation forming shapes, symbols. The same spiral pattern from the Helios. Hart backed toward the elevator. We need to get out now. They ran as the facility shook again. Behind them, the sound of metal bending, groaning, something vast pressing from beneath. The elevator doors slid shut, trapping Clark and his guards below. His last words rose through the intercom, distorted by static. Tell them the silence is the surface, and it's cracking. The elevator shot upward, rattling like a bullet casing. When it burst open into the hangar, dawn had turned to an ash-colored storm. Lightning rippled across the desert, but no thunder followed, only the deep pulse. Spreading through the air like a living drumbeat, they drove without speaking, the horizon trembling. Radio signals collapsed into static, cell networks died. Every 12 seconds, the static pulsed. Hart pressed a hand to her chest. It's inside the signal now, every frequency. Ethan gripped the wheel. If they're awake, we find out what they want. A distant rumble rolled across the desert, not thunder this time, but a vibration from below. The ground swelled, cracked open for a heartbeat, then sealed again. Hart stared at the fissure. They're not rising from the ocean anymore. No, Ethan said, voice flat. They're under everything. And that night, they took refuge in a small observatory near Roswell. The generator hummed weakly. On an old shortwave radio, faint voices spoke in panic, reports of lights beneath coastal waters, ships vanishing, satellites losing orbit. Ethan turned the dials until one channel cut through the noise, a steady, modulated tone speaking in frequencies too even to be human. He ran the output through his laptop's translator. The text scrolled across the screen. Harmony requires silence. Hart looked at him, realization dawning. They're shutting us up, he nodded. Every transmission, every network, the world's noise, they're erasing it. Suddenly, the observatory's telescope motors turned on by themselves, adjusting toward the west. The stars blurred across the lens until it stopped, fixed on the Pacific horizon. Through the glass, faint lines of light rippled across the ocean like veins glowing under skin. Hart whispered, They're building something. Ethan's breath caught, or remembering. The pulse returned, louder, faster now. 10 seconds, 9. The laptop screen filled with one final phrase before it shut off completely. Surface integration begun. By sunrise, the radio was dead. The sky had a dull green tint, the air heavy with static. They stood on a ridge overlooking the desert, the horizon trembling with heat waves that weren't heat. Hart turned to him. If this spreads any further, there won't be a world left to warn. Ethan glanced at the drive, still faintly pulsing. Then we take it back where it started. She understood immediately. The trench. He nodded. We finish what they began. They headed for the airfield. In the distance, the sun broke through the haze like an eye-opening. 12 seconds later, it blinked. Part 5, the descent again. The return to the Pacific felt like stepping into a memory that wanted them dead. 12 seconds. Always 12. Every wave, every radio hum, every heartbeat matched the rhythm. Ethan Cole and Dr. Emily Hart reached Pearl Harbor under fake names and borrowed uniforms. The world above was collapsing in slow motion. Communications offline, satellites blind, oceans rising in silent pulses. But the Navy still moved ships, quietly, pretending nothing was wrong. Their target, an old research submersible, the Orpheus, mothballed after the Helios disaster. Small, outdated, but built for depth. Hart ran her hand along the rusted hull. This thing's been sitting here for 20 years. Ethan checked the drive, the pulse bright as a heartbeat. Then it remembers how to get home. They launched at dusk. The sky looked bruised, clouds folding into spirals like something watching from above. As they descended, light disappeared fast, replaced by that familiar blue-black pressure. 10,000 feet, 15, 20. The pulse in the cabin synced with the hull's groan. Hart whispered, "It's guiding us." Ethan replied, "Or waiting for us." At 35,000 feet, the sonar came alive. A single shape below, massive, motionless like the planet's heart. The same coordinates from 3 years earlier. The Mariana Trench, the grave of the Helios. Ethan's hands trembled on the controls. He heard voices in the static, familiar, broken. Captain Briggs, Chief Rourke, even Clark, all whispering one phrase, "Come back." Hart leaned over the sonar. The trench isn't just deep. It's open. The water ahead shimmered, bending light into a spiral. Through it, faint shapes, towers, arches, impossible geometry, an entire city sculpted from living matter. Not ruins, not alien, something ancient. Ethan breathed. This is where they were born. The pulse in the drive stopped. For the first time in years, silence, then a voice, soft, resonant, inside their minds. Balance restored through understanding. Hart gasped. They're speaking through the drive. The walls of the sub flickered with bioluminescent veins. Outside, colossal forms stirred, their movement slow as tectonic plates. Eyes opened in the dark. Not hostile, curious. Ethan pressed the transmitter. "If you can hear us, what do you want?" The reply came not as words, but feeling. Memory, history, patience. Images filled their minds, earth forming, oceans rising, the leviathans shaping currents to sustain life. They weren't destroyers. They were the ocean's immune system. Hart whispered, "They woke because we poisoned the planet." Ethan nodded slowly. "And now they're cleansing it." The sub's sensors spiked, temperature rising, pressure stabilizing. The city below pulsed brighter. Another wave of thought flooded through them. Harmony through sacrifice. Ethan realized what that meant. They're using fault lines to purge the surface, reset the balance. Hart's eyes filled with tears. "Then we stop it." He turned to the control panel, hands shaking. "We can overload the drive, reverse the frequency, make them hear our side." She stared at him. "It could kill us." He smiled faintly. "It already did once." They wired the drive to the sub's reactor, aligning its pulse to human neural patterns. Ethan placed his palm on the glass viewport. "Listen to me," he said, not to Hart, but to the ocean itself. "You taught us silence. Now listen to what noise means." He activated the sequence. A surge of white light filled the cabin. Sound turned inside out. The pulse broke. 12 seconds became 10, then 8, then none. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then, a response. The city below shimmered. The leviathans withdrew their limbs, folding into the abyss. The ocean calmed. The hum stopped. Hart whispered, "They're sleeping again." Ethan sagged against the console, breath ragged. The world gets a second chance. The reactor alarms blared, temperature critical. Hart grabbed his hand. "There's no time." He looked at her, eyes tired but peaceful. "Tell them what we saw." The explosion bloomed like a sunrise in the dark. The Orpheus disintegrated in silence. Above, the waves went still. Satellites blinked back online. The global hum ended. The weeks later, news networks spoke of minor seismic corrections and unexplained radio interference. Nobody mentioned the 2 scientists lost at sea. But Dr. Emily Hart wasn't lost. She awoke in a hospital in Guam, rescued by a passing cargo ship. Beside her bed, an object sealed in glass. Ethan's drive, cracked but silent. She played it once more. No pulse, only one line of text glowing faintly on the screen. "Balance requires remembering." She smiled through tears. He did it. Outside, the Pacific glittered like nothing had ever stirred beneath it. But when the tide rolled back, she saw something carved into the sand. Perfect spirals, precise, deliberate. 12 seconds later, another wave erased them. Hart still tells the story sometimes, her voice steady but haunted. Not to the press, not to the Navy, just to those who still listen to the ocean. She ends it the same way every time. People think the sea is empty. They're wrong. It's listening. It always was. And then she smiles, soft, knowing, because somewhere deep beneath the surface, something old and patient listens back.